prices or prices otherwise is not here to stay. Recovery is here to stay, and that's what IIFL is betting on as well. It is a pent-up demand, and there's a lot of demand generally that we are seeing in the sector as well. So let's do one thing. Let's take this discussion forward. Parvez Akhtar Qazi, the Executive Director at the Nuvama Group, is joining us now to discuss this and the trends otherwise in the market as well. Parvez, good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us. Well, as you heard me, I was talking about how NCR markets have done very well. In the note that you recently put out, it highlighted how NCR has been doing better than the other markets. Can you give us some reasons as to what's happening here? August was a little bit low on the lower side, but year-to-date performance has been very strong.
Hi, good afternoon. So the key reason why the NCR market is doing better than the others is because this was the market which was the most impacted when the real estate downturn was happening over the last decade. In terms of number of developers, NCR market has witnessed almost about 80 to 90% of developers, which let's say were present in 2010-12 period, shutting shop. The demand there had also declined by 70 to 80% compared to the peak that we had seen in 2012. So obviously the pent-up demand, which has kind of happened over the last decade, is now coming up in strength. And it is no surprise that you are witnessing this kind of growth in the market. In fact, going ahead also, you will see the NCR market continuing to outperform the other markets. Something similar is happening on the launches side also, that since the number of developers left there are so less. So therefore, the base effect is quite favorable in terms of overall supply, and which is visible in the fact that YTD supply there is up 138% YOY. We are still far away from the kind of volumes that we had seen in NCR in 2010 to 12. So over the next couple of years, this region should continue to outshine others in terms of both supply as well as demand, as far as percentage growth is concerned.
Parvez, you want to give us some numbers? You're saying the current volumes in terms of the amount that's being sold and even launches is much lower than what we had in 2010, which was the past cycle for NCR. Can you give us those numbers? How off are we compared to those people? Yeah.
We are not even halfway there.
Not even halfway there. And did we see a similar pent-up demand in other markets like Mumbai? I remember Mumbai also had a big demand, immediately demand surge post-COVID. How long does this, pent-up demand cycle last, say for NCR region?
So, when we talk about pent-up demand, it is ultimately to do with affordability. Now, NCR, as I said, was the worst affected market in terms of pricing performance also. In fact, in many regions in NCR, there was an absolute decline in prices between 2012 and let's say 2017-18, because of which the affordability in the region is quite strong. And that is the reason why the sales volumes are also very high. Now, MMR as a market also is doing reasonably well, but affordability in MMR is still the worst when you compare it with the other top 6-7 cities in India. And which is why the sales volumes in MMR are kind of slightly on the, you can't say softer, but they're slightly lower in percentage terms when compared with other cities.
Oh, of course, we all live in Mumbai and we know the prices here of all the real estate properties available as well. Parvez, one of the issues that the NCR developers were also facing was a lot of debt. Their balance sheets were quite stretched as well. Is that a concern which is over across the real estate listed space and unlisted if you track some of them? Do you think the debt problem is now behind us?
So that problem is still prevalent, and in fact that is what I had said, that almost 70 to 80% of developers which were present in NCR in 2010 are probably no longer operating because they've either gone bankrupt or even today they are struggling to manage their debt issues. The balance 10-20% which are left, which may be either listed or unlisted, are the ones who are still standing there. The industry consolidation has been very high there, and which is why the market share of all those who are left standing today is pretty high. In fact, that is the reason I said that we are probably not even 50% there of what we were, mainly because the number of developers left standing today is much lower than what it was a decade back. It will take at least a couple of years to go back to the levels that we had seen in NCR a decade back.
Okay, all right. And generally, the uptick or the pent-up demand that we are seeing across all the other geographies as well. Could you give us a sense of which are your top bets in the listed space, and something that you would suggest or you would have a buy rating on?
So we like NCR regions the most amongst the top 6, 7 cities in India, and which is the reason DLF, which is the leader in the NCR market, is our topic. We also like the Bangalore market largely because of the robust tech ecosystem which has kind of developed there, and which is why Brigade is also amongst the top pick. Among the top 6, 7 cities, Hyderabad would probably be the only region where one could say that one needs to be cautious about, but the other top 6 cities are all doing pretty well.
Thank you very much for joining in and throwing light on the various nuances of India's real estate market. Get into a break. On the other side, we'll get you more on the market. Stay tuned.